Let me shake your hand. Yeah. Y'all sounded wonderful this morning. Okay, all right. Now, we have a special speaker this morning. Many of you think you know him, but our people have been doing extensive research. And so, Bret, if you'll stand up. You know him as Bret Walters, our preacher. And you probably know he's the father of 2 beautiful children. And you probably know that somehow he convinced the beautiful and saintly Lainey Baker, now Walters, to marry him.
Barker.
This just in, Barker. And the reason that's important is that she is kin to somebody else in the congregation. Eugene Barker is her great uncle. All right, let's hear it for Eugene Barker. All right, okay. Okay, now, you probably know that Bret was born in Nashville. You probably know his father worked for the railroad for CXX and has retired now. And you probably know he went to Lipscomb. But what you don't know, this is new. You remember from his sermon, How to Be in the Church Without Killing Each Other. That is the title of a new blog he is just starting. And the first subject to be discussed is, if you think being a member is hard, you should try being the preacher. Please help me, our own Bret Walters.
Thank you, Russ. I am thoroughly convinced that Brother Russ will be the last one into heaven, because when he gets there, St. Peter is going to say, whoa, 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 I need you to introduce every person that is coming into heaven before you go in. The best introduction person out there. Amen. It's good to be with you, and seems like I was just with you a few moments ago. And here we are again. If you have your Bibles, I want to invite you to pull those out and turn with me to Romans chapter 12. We'll be there in just a moment. I know, and I love, one of the things I love about this class is that, Russ always says, bring an encouraging word. And so I'm going to try to do the impossible. I'm going to try to take a discouraging topic and make it an encouraging word. All right? And so I hope you'll get what I'm saying here in just a moment. But I want to read Romans 12 before we jump into that. A familiar passage for several of us, but there's a phrase in here that I want to get to. So you remember in Romans chapter 12, verse 1, Paul says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." And I want you to skip down with me to verse 9. "Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love." I always have to stop right there because I remember at church camp I had a little camper one time, and we were trying to memorize this verse, and he just could not get it. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. And so I decided to start rapping it, like a rap artist would do. And so I would just start, I said, "Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Be devoted to one another." And after about the 10th time, he got it, and he could say it the rest of the week. And I'll never forget that. And he probably memorizes that verse to this day. "Honor one another above yourselves," verse 11. "Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality." Y'all remember the hospitality challenge we did a few months ago? How cool was that? "Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse." Then verse 15, this is where we're going to land for today. "Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited." And so here's the encouraging word that I want us to focus on today is, how do you mourn with those who mourn? I really believe this is an important topic for us, and it's one that I've reflected on the past few months. And the reason that I say that, I went to a workshop here in town over there at the Brookdale Park, and it was the workshop was called "A Necessary Grief: Essential Tools for Leadership and Bereavement Ministry." And part of what I do, part of my job is to be with folks who are mourning. I go to quite a bit of funerals. I meant to grab the stack in my office, but in one of my cabinets, I have a stack of eulogies. And sometimes I'll just pull those out, and you may think that that's weird, but sometimes I'll just pull it out and I reflect on the saints that have gone home to be with the Lord over the past few years. And I'll thank God for the influence that they've been in my life. And it's just something that's, you would think, well, that's part of the minister's job. I want to submit to us today in an encouraging way that it's not just the paid minister's job to mourn with those who mourn. And, I was reflecting on a couple statistics here, that 1 in 3 Americans experience the loss of a loved one each year. So you just take our faith family here. We have about 600 folks on Sunday morning that gather in this room and throughout the building. So you think 1 in 3 Americans experience the loss of a loved one every year. So statistically, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 200 folks in our faith family are going to experience the loss of a loved one. Now, it could be someone very, very close. It could be an immediate family member. It could be a parent. It could be a brother, sister, a child. It could be an aunt and uncle. It could be a relative. It could be a close friend. But we all go through this. This past week, one of our young families, they have 2 young children. The mom's dad passed away, and that's 4 members in that family. And so those 4, that's 4 of the 200 that just happened this week. Maybe you've experienced the loss in the past few weeks or this year. And so as I was reflecting on that, I was looking at this book by Larry Michael. He's he was the executive director of Alabama Grief Support, and he's one of the ones that kind of led this conference that I went to. But he makes some of these suggestions, some of the thoughts that I borrowed, some that I put down as my own. And so I wanted us to just do a little exercise as we jump in this morning, and Laney's going to help just pass these out. If you'll take one of these, and as you get it, we're going to go through this together. And this is something that Larry Michael presents as right and wrong things to say to someone in grief. What I've learned is that a lot of times, if you've gone through a grief in your family, a lot of times folks certainly have good intentions in what they say, but sometimes we can say things that are not helpful. Sometimes we say things because they're just cliche, and that's just what we've always kind of said. And so as we look through this list, I want you to go through, and if you think that a statement is the right thing to say, I want you to put an R next to it. If you think it's the right thing to say, put an R next to it. If you think it's the wrong thing to say, I want to encourage you to put a W next to it. Now, as you look through this list, there's some that are subjective. So I wouldn't say that it's completely black and white all the time. Sometimes some of these are dependent upon circumstance. But these, according to Larry Michael, are some of the statements that we make, and he says that some of these are right, some of these are wrong. So let's go through it. Is it a good thing to say or not a good thing to say, right or wrong, to go up to somebody and say, everything will be all right? Wrong. Larry and Michael would agree with you. Is it right or wrong to say there's a reason for everything? Wrong, according to Larry and Michael. Is it right or wrong to say when it's your time, it's your time? Wrong. Is it right or wrong to say you are in my thoughts and prayers? Right. It's a good thing to say. Is it right or wrong to say I am always just a phone call away? That's a good thing to say, isn't it? What about I care? Right. What about I know how you feel?
But that depends.
That does depend. It can depend. But, according to Larry Michael, in a lot of cases, to assume that you know exactly how someone feels, even if you've been through a similar situation, is not exactly the same. Okay? It's probably for the best that this happened. Wrong. Time heals all wounds. Wrong. It was God's will. I've heard that said many a times. Words cannot express how I feel. Isn't that good? I feel for you at this difficult time. Right. Just know that I'm here for you. Right. You have to be strong. Wrong. And it doesn't mean that some of these are false. Right and wrong doesn't mean true or false. Some of these statements can be very true. But knowing how to share those with somebody at the appropriate time is where discernment is needed. What about God wanted her for his angel? It's wrong. What about be thankful that she or he is in a better place? It's something we say a lot. And there's some truth to that. But is it helpful? Try to be positive and look for the good in the situation. Wrong. And these are, according to Larry Michael, you may have your own views. You shouldn't feel that way. Wrong. Well, he should have just taken care of himself. Is there some truth to that, maybe? Maybe some truth. But is it helpful? Probably not. Don't cry. It will upset the others. Is that right or wrong? And these are actual statements that have been made several times at funeral homes, at visitations. I've heard almost all of these. I've heard almost all of these in 5 years. But I think it would be helpful when we consider Romans 12, how to mourn with those who mourn, that it would be helpful for us to think about what that looks like. And so if you want to turn your page over, and if you're a note-taking person, I would encourage you to maybe jot some of these down. And if you're not a note-taking person, I would encourage you to write some of these down. Just to reflect on. And again, these are a combination of my thoughts and also Larry Michael's thoughts, but 8 suggestions on really I added a 9th one this morning, but suggestions on how we can help a person in grief. And I really believe it's one of the most encouraging things that we can do, and not just punt to the paid professionals, but something that we can do in the lives of other people. Number 1 is this, write this down, to be present for them. I've learned in ministry that I don't have to say something clever or to give some great spiritual insight to somebody who's grieving. That oftentimes just being present makes a big difference. And now the reality is that I'm one man, and I can't be everywhere all the time with everybody. I just can't, and neither can our shepherds. So we need a little grace in that. But there are times where it is important just to let your presence be presence. It's one of the reasons that we have connect groups and small group community here at this church, because we know that one man cannot be in the lives every day of 800 people. It's impossible. And if you don't think it's impossible, I'll let you try it for a couple weeks and then come back and report to me. But one of the things that I've learned is that this passage in the book of Job loses his children, his property, his livestock, and his health. Now I want you to read with me in Job chapter 2, starting in verse 11. After all this has happened, we just gloss over that sentence. Job loses his children, his property, his livestock, and his health. And we read that like, oh, well, that's just a Bible story. Can you, just put yourself in that circumstance for a moment. To lose all those things. Children, property, livestock, health, gone. Just like that. And it says in Job 2:11, when Job's 3 friends heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. And when they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. And then verse 13. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him. They sat with him for 7 days, 7 nights. No one said a word because they saw how great his suffering was. Now we know some of their later conversations may have not been as fruitful, but that is profound to me. To just be present, even just to sit in silence. Number 2 is to listen with compassion. So number 1 is be present. Number 2, listen with compassion. That we give a person the permission to talk about their loss. And several of you have walked this road of life a lot longer than I have, and I don't claim to have all the answers in this. And you've shared in this mourning with those who mourn more than I have. But many times I've found that individuals are well-meaning, but they want to avoid mentioning the person who has passed on. And a lot of times it's just we don't know what to say, and we don't know how to say it, and so we just avoid. And we don't mention. And I see some of you shaking your heads because you know exactly what I'm talking about. But listening with compassion means letting the person express their feelings. Don't try to tell somebody that they shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't feel that way. They don't need judgment or criticism, but acceptance and acknowledgement of their feelings. I found this to be a good rule of thumb when you're just being present with someone and when you're listening with compassion. And that's to listen about 80% of the time and talk about 20% of the time. That's a good rule of thumb. People need to ascribe to that rule of thumb. Do not demean the loss. This gets back to a statement earlier. Don't pretend to understand the loss, even if you've been through something similar. And it's okay to, at the appropriate time, to say, here's my experience. I know it's not exactly the same, but I want to share this with you as a way to encourage you. Speak with candor. If someone wants to talk about their loved one, respond in a forthright manner. Don't force it, but probe gently. Tell me a little bit more about your loved one? What are some stories that you remember? What are some things that you celebrate about their life and your relationship? No, that we're still on 2. Those were just some comments under number 2. So 1, be present. 2, listen with compassion. And then 3 is don't treat the person differently. When people are grieving, other people around them often consciously or unconsciously react to them in ways that don't seem natural. Often when someone experiences a dramatic change that comes with grief, they struggle with a sense of identity. And one of the most important things that you and I can do is try to be natural around them. That doesn't mean, again, avoid or fluff off or anything like that, but so often we get so unnatural because we don't know what to do. And so pray for a spirit of naturalness in just your relationship with that person. Number 4 is this, to encourage the person to remember and not forget. I've often found that folks like to share humorous stories about their loved one or places that they've gone. I thought that this was helpful by Philip Yancey. He said a woman in Wisconsin lost her only son in a Marine Corps helicopter crash. For years, she could not escape the dark cloud of grief. She kept her son's room intact just as he had left it. Eventually, she began to notice how frequently helicopter crashes were reported on the news. And she kept thinking of other families facing tragedies like her and wondering whether she could do something to help. And so now, whenever a military helicopter crashes, she sends a packet of letters and helpful materials to an officer in the Defense Department who forwards the packet to the affected family. About half of them strike up a regular correspondence. And in her retirement, this Wisconsin woman directs her own community of suffering. The activity has not solved the grief for her son, of course, but it has given her a sense of meaning as she no longer feels helpless against the grief. So encouraging folks to remember and not forget is helpful. 5, we're almost done, halfway through. Take the initiative with offers to help. I like this one because a lot of times, what do we hear? What do we say to folks? Hey, if you need something, just call me. How many of you have received that call? A couple, yes. Close friends, yeah. But more times than not, it might be helpful just to go ahead and do something that you see that needs to be done. Here's some examples. Mow the lawn if it's needed. Shop for groceries. Help with the wash. Help clean the house. I love one family here who had a tragic situation go on, and all of a sudden next thing they know, there's people cutting their grass from the church. They didn't even know that they were coming, and then there's laundry detergent sitting by the washing machine, and they didn't know how it got there, and just seeing things that need to be done. Help watch children if they have children. Maybe help receive phone calls and guests in their home. Maybe take food. Help with forms or bills. Take them to places that they need to go. Go for a walk with them. Help with their pets. Take them to lunch. Share an activity that they enjoy. Go to a movie together. Just take the initiative with offers to help. And number 6, resist the urge to fix things for them. Do we have any Mr. Fix-Its or Mrs. Fix-Its in the crowd?
Are you talking about spiritually?
Yeah, this is really one, I think that Larry Michael would agree that is for close family members or close friends. He says, I've seen close relatives and friends who want to swoop in and try to fix things as you think they ought to be. So, like to get rid of all their loved ones' clothing out of their closet, or to clean out, this room, or to bag up all their stuff. That needs to be done. Let's go ahead and do that. And what I've found is that in several of you in this room who have been through loss may correct me if I'm wrong, but every person has their own timing and things like that. That's not for you to decide. That's for the persons to decide on their own. And the desire is noble. It's not like it's an unnoble desire. It's a very noble desire, but it may not be your place to do that. So a gentle nudge may be okay, but resist the temptation to fix everything how you think it should be. Number 7 is be aware of warning signs. And I really wish that I know I need to do a better job of this, but it's quite usual for grieving persons to feel that they are losing their minds or even going crazy, and many of their symptoms are normal for individuals who have lost a loved one. But as time goes on, there may be signs that people are experiencing complicated grief. If you see somebody having trouble functioning in everyday life, if there's an obsessive focus on the death, if there's prevailing bitterness or anger or guilt, if there's a decline in personal hygiene, if there's a dependency on alcohol or drugs, if there's an inability to enjoy simple things in life, if there's confusion that continues long term, or withdrawing and secluding themselves from others, or continuous feelings of hopelessness, or talking about dying or suicide, all of those things, we need to be aware of warning signs for our friends and loved ones. And number 8 is to pay special attention to difficult days. And, birthdays and anniversaries and holidays and those kind of things are difficult, especially, for folks. And so a card or a phone call or a text or a Facebook message, hey, I know it's your loved one's birthday, or hey, I know it's your anniversary, or hey, I know this is the first Christmas or the first Thanksgiving that you've experienced without your loved one. I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. Is that helpful? That's helpful for folks. And then the last one that I'll add on here is don't just tell someone you are praying for them. Actually commit to doing it. A lot of times we can say hey, I'm praying for you. And one of the things that I found helpful, and I know it's not something that everybody's comfortable with, but when I tell somebody that I'm praying for them, a lot of times I'll stop right there, even if we're in the foyer out here or if we're on the phone. I'll just stop right there and, hey, do you mind if I pray with you over the phone? Do you mind if I pray with you right here in the hall? Can we do that? And you know what? I have rarely had somebody tell me no. They are always. Even before I was a minister, I would do that in the work world. I'd be sitting with somebody and we'd be talking about insurance benefits, and I say, hey, can I pray for you? And do you know, for 7 years in the insurance industry, I would do that at least once or twice a month, and I never had somebody tell me no. I never did. It's a blessing. Don't just tell people you're praying for them. Actually do it. Actually do it. Russ, thank you for letting me share today. I really appreciate it. Since I did mention that one as the last one, I think I would be remiss if I didn't pray for you guys right now. Father, we thank you that you have given us your word. We thank you that Paul tells us to rejoice with those who rejoice and to mourn with those who mourn. And God, we realize that we don't always do that well, but we are thankful for your word, and we're thankful for resources like Larry Michael provides that can just give us some insight on how to help walk alongside brothers and sisters. And I pray that we'll do that faithfully. And I pray that we won't shy away from that, but that we will commit to being the hands and feet of your Son, Jesus. I'm so thankful that he didn't leave us, nor did he forsake us. But in him we have hope. In him we have everlasting life, and we're thankful for that. Thank you for this class. Thank you for the encouraging words, class, and what they mean to this faith family and what they mean to you. I pray that you'll continue to bless them with insight and bless us all with that same insight on how to serve you better. It's in Jesus I pray. Amen.
Okay. Brett, thank you. Thank you. It was supposed to be encouraging words, but very helpful, very helpful. One of the things that I heard a grief counselor say once was, when somebody dies, they usually won't argue with the Lord about the dying because everybody dies. But they may want to argue about the timing. We did have some feedback. My people were talking with me right after your introduction, and the thing about being last into heaven, we're still researching that, but I think my people will want to get with your people. And the other thing, Linda Tumlin did say that one of those things you really had wrong on your sheet, it should be time wounds all heals. Okay. Thank you, Linda. Our people will be getting with you also.